Assalamu alaikum and welcome folks to the Halal Times YouTube channel. Today we're excited to have the presence of a veteran of the finance industry. His name is Mr. Karsten Kenma. Currently he is working as the Managing Director of Asia Pacific CREALOGIX based in Singapore. His main area of responsibility is the strategic business development of CREALOGIX in this exciting and challenging growth market. Prior to CREALOGIX, he spent most of his professional career in the financial services industry, including stints with wealth management and retail banking solution providers. Throughout his professional career, he's had a strong focus on business transformation towards software and services. During the past 14 years, Mr. Kenma spent significant amount of time with high-profile banks across the Asia-Pacific region to help define their digital initiatives and drive their innovation agenda to stay on top of the value chain. With his long history in helping banks and financial institutions enhance their offerings, Mr. Kenma is a true leader in the digital banking industry. Could you please let us know a bit about yourself and the company you're working for?
I'm the managing director of a Swiss company called CREALOGIX. Last year had our 25th anniversary, and we focus on digital front-end solutions for banks, institutions like asset managers, like maybe even insurances. What that means is what you and I would use, for example, if you do online banking or if you do a mobile banking, not only the interface, not only the look and feel, but also the underlying platform is what we're focused on.
Perhaps you're talking about the fintech industry.
Fintech is very broad, to be honest. I think normally you would say fintech is relatively new players and people that are trying to make a difference in the market. So the first point, we are not. We are relatively experienced already, and we have a customer base of more than 500 institutions across Europe, Middle East, and Asia.
Could you please let us know a bit about your business model, how the business model was working before the rise of the fintech, and now what extra services you've added into your portfolio?
The first customer we had as CREALOGIX 25 years ago was Credit Suisse in Switzerland, and we did their first initial online banking. And you can imagine 25 years ago, it's a little bit different than today in terms of technology, in terms of customer experience. So over time, this has evolved. Besides the original retail environment, we've put a lot of focus on the wealth management space. We are also covering topics like small and medium enterprise banking, corporate banking. We're working with what we call the funding banks, so the government-backed funding banks in Europe together. So not our portfolio only has increased, but also the target customers that we are approaching. Personally, I don't think that the fintech is really the key change factor, but the key change factor is for me the rise of the mobile. And especially in Asia Pacific, everybody's expecting everything to be done on the mobile. Looking, for example, when you go into a subway train in Singapore, everybody has a mobile in their hand. And therefore, this is the one and most important item that banks try to drive with their customers, which is mobile first.
What do you foresee in this year to 2022 just started? And what do you think are the main changes which are going to happen in the coming years?
So before I look in the future, I want to quickly reflect on what happened the last 1.5 years or 2 years.
Yes, you're right.
Obviously, everybody has been affected by COVID-19 in a mostly negative way, but I guess some environments also in a positive way as an opportunity. Working from home and more or less not being able to get across people any longer so much is really driving a lot of digitalization efforts, is making the banks accelerate their digital strategy, their digital transformation, just because they want to continue serving their customers. And before COVID, you would have, let's say, a monthly meeting with your advisor, with your relationship manager. You have a coffee and you talk about stuff. Nowadays, it's much more a hybrid advisory model where the majority of discussions, including transactions, can be done remotely through self-guided information gathering or through a secure chat channel, a conversational channel that the advisor might have with yourself. And only in very rare cases you may need to meet the person face to face. So this hybrid advisory model is really making a big difference, also because it allows the limited number of advisors that the banks have to cover more customers and cover them more easily.
I guess you are serving all types of customers working in the financial industry. Could you please let us know a bit more specifically about the type of companies which would be your ideal customers?
The ideal customer is a financial institution that has need for digitalization and has budget to spend. But jokes aside, if you look at our range of customers globally, we have big banks, tier one banks, that trust us with their retail banking. The legacy of the company is mostly on the wealth management side. Tier one, tier two banks, boutique type of wealth management houses. We are currently striving to get into the insurance space. I don't think there's an optimal customer. We're looking for financial institutions that want to really upscale and upgrade their digital setup to a much more modern and technology-driven setup that is then able to interact also with other systems, other tools that this bank might have in place already. Right. We're talking here about open banking, we're talking about API economy, we're talking about relatively easy time to market of new functionalities and things like that.
I got a chance to look at your company's website, and your secretary also told me that you offer ethical and Sharia-compliant solutions to your customers as well. So could you please let us know as to what type of solutions these are?
First of all, we see the relevance and the need for Sharia-compliant solutions growing more and more in the markets. I mean, I'm covering Asia Pacific, so I can only speak about Asia Pacific. So if I look at Malaysia and Indonesia, I think the number of regulations around Sharia-compliant banks and also what is supposed to happen in the next few years has increased a certain expectation towards the banks to have such a either subsidiary or own bank founded that is focusing really on this Sharia compliance. When we talk about specific areas, one thing that also in, let's say, the universal banking space is something very prominent at the moment is what is called ESG, which really is about ecological, sociological, and governance type of investments, which is supposed to be good investments, which I guess fits 100% also with, the belief of the Sharia law, how much you can invest into certain industries, how much you can not invest into other stuff, for example, gambling or stuff like that. So I think this is anyway a trend that is just being, let's say, multiplied on the Islamic banking side. Then we talk about very pragmatic topics like that we allow or we enable customers to calculate their zakat through an app. That all of this, which previously maybe a manual process, is being brought over to a mobile app that, again, people who are using this app anyway on a regular basis are able to do so also for the Sharia banking activities. Talking about loyalty programs or talking about multi-language, you are able to also use Arabic language skills on the apps, that you have a dual calendar in the app. These are just small things that we are working to enable really also a more Sharia compliant setup. When you look at the value chain or when you look at how a bank is set up, you have the front end, what we focus on, and then you have the back end, which is where all the transactional data, the personal data is being stored. So the actual Sharia topics are somewhere in the middle between both of these environments. So it's not 100% front-end driven. There are certain components where the front-end can really implement certain stuff that I just mentioned, but a big part is also in the back-end, which would be the core banking providers.
At the end of the day, every company, including the financial institutions which you're serving, they have to serve their own customers. First of all, they got to serve the customers who are coming to them. So it means they have to be local. So your solutions, maybe you can fully customize your solutions to meet the growing needs of your customers?
We are actually covering different segments of banks. And a wealth management side will need a different solution than a retail banking side, for example, or an SME banking. We are in Malaysia currently heavily involved with virtual bank, neobank activities of the government of Bank Negara Malaysia. From my understanding is they're going to be, hopefully by the end of this month, I don't know exactly when, there's going to be 5 licenses appointed, 3 universal bank licenses and 2 Sharia bank licenses. And we as CREALOGIX are in the race for a number of these applicants and being part of their consortiums. That's one side. But the scope of such a solution, which is really building up a greenfield bank on a virtual basis, is totally different than when you look at a wealth management setup. On the wealth management setup, you're looking at probably at different customers, different clients, especially, with growing middle class and higher income levels in Indonesia, in Malaysia. There's a new segment building up that banks also need to cover and want to cover, because this is where they can create more wealth for their customers. And this is where a totally different solution will be required than what I just mentioned on the other side, on the neobanks.
From your perspective, what do you think, why they should speed up their digital adoption so that they can start serving customers in a much better way than they are doing right now?
I think it's a matter of survival. If you have the neobanks coming up, for example, they will probably be much cheaper, or let's call it much more cost effective. Yes. But they will probably also have a more modern technology to be able to serve and satisfy their customers. If you compete against this and you don't have a proper digital offering and people cannot do a transaction, let's say at 3 o'clock in the morning on their mobile phone, it's much easier today for clients to switch their banking service provider than, let's say, 10 years ago. For these banks to stay relevant and to really continue making a difference is a matter of being digital or not being at all. You mean to say that it's an ongoing battle between the old style financial institutions plus neobanks? It's not against only the neobanks. I mean, some countries don't have neobanks yet, or maybe will never have. It's really more about the ability and the willingness of the traditional banks, and especially if they are big size banks, to change and to become truly digital in order to be able to compete against other big banks that may be slower, neobanks, smaller banks, and even companies like fintech companies that are also offering banking services, but are officially not a bank per se. Good example of bank that has really done an excellent job in driving digital transformation journey is in Singapore is DBS. But at the same time, you must also say this is a long process. This is not a 1-year process, but the whole journey has started probably 10 years ago or 7, 8 years ago. I'm not sure if it will ever end. Because there's technological enhancements, there's new topics. You have to include things like blockchain or crypto, or you have to include things like artificial intelligence, machine learning. So there is a progression that people in these innovative banks have to continue staying on top of the game, because otherwise, you are overtaken. Based on your vast experience in this financial technology industry, do you think that Asia Pacific region is ready to challenge Europe and North America? They are going to outcompete, or what is going to be the future as far as fintech revolution or whatever keyword you would like to use is concerned? I think Asia is more advanced and more innovative, especially when it comes to mobile. And which for me is at the same time the digital forefront. Especially, let's say, some of the emerging markets like Indonesia, Malaysia are super innovative because they have to cope with certain environments that require a certain degree of flexibility. Bandwidth, for example, or lack of infrastructure or that kind of things. If we're talking about financial inclusion, and how do you also bring banking services to rural communities? And having said this, and this is now turning back to our original purpose of the discussion, in countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, this can only work if there is some strong emphasis also on digital within the Sharia-compliant framework. And therefore, this is what the banks are implementing in these countries.
So from your perspective, Sharia compliant, ethical, and sustainable solutions, they are one and the same, or there are some minor differences?
The idea behind it is very much the same. Just that what we consider ESG solutions in the, let's call it universal banks, is probably more based on other reasons. But having said that, I think that these reasons are also relevant for Muslims.
I'm a bank. I'm looking for some solution for a digital solution. I would like to digitalize our services for our customers all over the country, wherever my geographical target customers are located. What do you think? Why should I choose you instead of going to your competitors?
That's a very good question. And I mean, the first question I would ask back is, who is my competitor? Because today, I mean, you have the technology vendors like ourselves. So, for example, some of the big banks, they have huge development centers on their own, which they also have to feed and which also need to survive in terms of bringing the right solutions to the market. So my answer is the following. First of all, experience.
Right.
Having done it for 25 years and having a huge customer reference base behind it to prove it. Second reason, you don't start from zero. You don't start from scratch. If you give it to an own development center, they will not have these experiences, these expertise on their people. Yes, on the one side they have probably more people, but on the other side they will take much more efforts and much more time. With the progress over the last few years, especially on the technology side, you can assume that CREALOGIX has the latest and the greatest technology platforms underlying our solutions, which is, which makes your product or which makes your solution future-proven if Bank A decided to go with us. So it's not something that will be obsolete after 3 years, but we always make sure that we are in line with all the advancements on the technology side, and therefore we don't run behind. Again, current topics that are always discussed is open banking concept, API integration with third parties, etc.
Thank you so much for your valuable time. I'm sure our viewers will be able to learn a lot from the insights which you have shared with us today, sir. Hopefully we can catch up again to discuss more advancement, maybe sometime in the future, sir. Thank you so much.